The first panel is Sheriff Gary Stanton, and this panel will be discussing how is realignment working slash challenges. So, Sheriff Stanton.
Where are we working from? Right here? I have to read and hold this at the same time. I'm going to sit up there and do this. I have to be able to lay this down. Okay, we're going to check the sound. Can you hear me in the back of the room? This thing working? Okay, great. Thank you for being here this evening. I'm Gary Stanton. I'm the Solano County Sheriff, and what I'm going to do this evening is provide you with an overview of public safety realignment. Those of you who know me would expect me to be candid in my comments, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. The title is Public Safety Realignment, and I'm not sure how we wound up with public safety wrapped into this because it does little or nothing for public safety at this point. There's some potential in the future for this to be good for public safety, but for right now, I don't think it really is a public safety issue. Well, it's going to be a public safety issue, but it's not really lined up that way. So I think what happened here was this is kind of like cooties. If you say cooties, everybody goes, ooh, I don't want cooties. But if you say public safety cooties, they go, well, that's not so bad. There's public safety in it. How bad could it be? So I think that's what we have here. I think the governor figured out the best way to put this thing out in a palatable way was to wrap it in public safety. So that's what we have. I call it realignment. I have a hard time saying public safety realignment. I just say realignment. So how did we get here? What happened? What drove us to this point? Well, to start with, there was no significant prison construction for decades in California, and the numbers just continued to climb. We wound up in a situation where we had chronic prison overcrowding. Now, our state prison facilities are designed to house 81,000 inmates. Our actual population of state prisons got to 164,000, 202% of their design capacity. They were literally stepping over each other in state prisons. And to accommodate the crowd in the state prison, they started losing areas that were dedicated to recreation, areas that were dedicated to skills building, to training, to recovery, to rehabilitation. Those areas were lost to housing. A good example is I visited the Solano prison, and I was taken to one of their dormitories, and I noticed when I was in there that it was really very, very heavily crowded with inmates, and the bunks were stacked, I think, 2 or 3 bunks high and about 3 feet apart in rows. But the dormitory was a gymnasium. At one time, they had been playing basketball in there, and it was used as a place for people to recreate, and they lost that, and it became a dormitory. And that's what's happened all over the state. So we became chronically overcrowded. As a result of that, the prison was unable to adequately care for their inmates. Medical services, mental health services slipped. Overcrowding can cause you to miss out on a lot of things. Litigation was brought against the state of California for not taking care of inmates properly. Coleman Plata were the plaintiffs. They brought litigation against the state. And they do explain that overcrowding is not a constitutional violation, but failing to take care of people's medical needs, mental health needs, is a violation of the U.S. Constitution, and that's how the state lost the litigation. So litigation was brought. The state lost. They then lost the appeal. They're now required by the federal courts to maintain their prison population at 137.5% of their design capacity. And they must release 58,000 inmates within 3 years to achieve compliance with the federal judge's decision. That's how we got here. The other part of this is the state went broke. Quite honestly, the state just can't afford to feed and house and care for that many people. They can't do it. They can't pull it off. And they can't afford to staff the number of officers and support staff it takes to take care of 202,000 people. They don't have the money to do it. So that's how we got here. I like to use the term from a movie that was out several years ago called The Perfect Storm. And what we have here is basically the perfect storm for public safety. We have prison overcrowding, bumping up against litigation, bumping into a budget crisis, and that's what happened. So, in an effort to resolve the issue, AB 109 was signed by the governor on April 5th, 2011. AB 117 was signed by the governor on June 30th, 2011. The program's operative no later than October 1st, 2011, so we're already several months into it. And it prospectively applies to all offenders sentenced after October 1st, 2011. So what did it do? What did it do? Let me frame this a different way. What we're dealing with here is a fundamental shift in the way we manage our felony offender population in the state of California. Prior to realignment, if someone committed a crime in the state of California, it was a felony crime, they were sentenced to a term of confinement, typically they would go to jail for no more than a year. Any sentence longer than a year would be done at the state prison. That has all shifted now to where people are doing up to, well, in our jail, we have someone doing up to 5 years in the county jail now. There is one county jail, and I forget which county it is, where they have a 25-year sentence going, another has 15 years. So what happened here is that responsibility to deal with low-level offenders, and we'll define that a little better in a moment here, low-level offenders, instead of going to state prison, are now going to county jail to do their time. So we started receiving inmates in 4 different ways back into the community. The first way we received them was non-revocable parolees. These are people who were released from prison on non-revocable parole. That means they're free to go. There's no supervision. They're set free. And they're back in our community. If they offend, they come back to prison or to jail on a new commitment. There is no parole revocation. Second way we receive these people is in the post-release community supervision program. We call them PRCS. These are people who, the day prior to AB 109, were called parolees. And the parole system bifurcated. The state keeps the high-level parolees, the high-level offenders. The low-level offenders are now called PRCS, post-release community supervision, and they are assigned to local probation or the sheriff to supervise. In our county, they're supervised by probation. The third way we received offenders was the non-offenders. These are the criminal offenders who are convicted of nonviolent, non-sex offense, non-significant crimes. These people are diverted from state prison to the county jail. They will do their time in the county jail, whatever amount of time that is. And then the fourth wave that came to us were the parole violators. Typically, before October 1st, before AB 109, a parole violator would wind up being arrested in the community. He or she would be brought to the county jail. Their parole would be revoked, and we would hold them until they're finished with their Morrissey hearing. Then they would go off to state prison to do 6 months to a year back in prison. Now they all come to the county jail. None of them go back to state prison. The only way they can go back to state prison is on a new offense. They have to commit a new crime in the community, be convicted of that crime, and sentenced to the state prison on a violent crime, then they can go back to state prison. Other than that, they cycle back to the county jail. So, in 4 ways, we're receiving these people now. As I mentioned earlier, public safety realignment is a fundamental statewide shift in the philosophy of managing criminal offenders. The emphasis is on programming at the local level to reduce recidivism with the goal of successful reentry to society. I mean, that's what we all hope for. We all hope we can achieve that. That was the mission of state prison decades ago. Rehabilitation was the key word back then. And over time and through acute overcrowding, rehabilitation took a sidetrack, and it just didn't happen anymore. So what's been coming out of prison are people who, quite candidly, just got worse while they were in prison. They didn't get better. And we've been dealing with them for years, and it's been an endless cycle. We see the same people year after year after year coming in and out. Realignment is also the transition of responsibility for low-level criminal offenders to counties and cities. Basically, the community. The thought is, return these people to the community, let the community deal with them, and that's what we're doing. The state is not going to deal with these people any longer. Public safety is not the early release of inmates from state prison. Nobody gets out earlier than they should get out. Some people were concerned that the prison was just going to throw open the gates and turn these people loose on the community. That's not the case. They are coming out, but they're coming out under supervision. Except for the non-revocable parolees, they did get to walk. It's also not a direct transfer of state prison inmates to local jails. They just didn't take a group of prisoners and put them in the county jail. They were selective in how they did it. And we have the non-non-nons, as we call them, the N3s, the non-violent, non-significant criminals who are coming to the county jail now. Now, when I say non-non-non, I need to define that a little better. That is someone who is currently sentenced to a non-violent crime. That doesn't mean they didn't have violence in their past. And that's something we're having to deal with because some of these people do have violent crimes in their past. We have to be cautious with these people. We're noticing in my jail a level of criminal sophistication that's changing. These people are coming back into the jail after multiple times in state prison in some cases. They are influencing the other inmates. They are harder to deal with. We're going to talk more about that in the panel. We are seeing some significant changes in the attitude in the jail. And it's only going to get worse as time goes on. There were a couple of key provisions of this legislation. It redefined many felonies so that people could go to the county instead of the state. It expands alternatives to custody for local jails. It gives the sheriff the authority to put pre-sentenced inmates into programs, into release programs in case the sheriff becomes overcrowded. It changes custody credits. Now we have credits. Let me explain credits. People get credits for time served for just sitting in custody. They do nothing and they get credit. So the way it's aligned now, the cities and the state, I'm sorry, the counties and the state, in some cases cities, because there are some city jails as well, but the counties and the state had different ways of applying credits. Now the states and the counties are aligned the same. So what someone in a state prison gets, they get in the county jail as far as credit goes. Basically, they do half their time, day for day. Parole revocation is now served in the local jail. That's probably been the biggest impact we've experienced, and we'll have more on that later on. And the legislation established the executive committee in the Community Corrections Partnership. This is the group that has the voting rights in the Community Corrections Partnership. These are the, see if I can remember the pecking order here. We have the sheriff. I remember that one. That's the easy one. We have the sheriff, the district attorney, the chief probation officer. We have the presiding judge. We have the chief probation officer. And we have Patrick Duerte is in there. It's actually one member appointed by the board who happens to be Patrick in this case. Did I miss anybody, Patrick? Oh, I'm sorry, our public defender. Our lovely public defender, I might add. I hope that helped. Yeah, our friendly public defender. And that group makes up the voting body of the Community Corrections Partnership. Pardon me? Oh, and Chief Ward, that's right. Chief, oh, there's Chief right there. I'm sorry, Chief. I forgot. We have one roving police chief, and Chief Ward was tagged, and he is part of this process now. Okay, public safety realignment redefined felony offenses and sentencing practices. It redefined, it revises the definition of a felony to include certain crimes that are punishable by sentences to local jail, local prison as it's called now, for more than 1 year. As I mentioned earlier, before this, you could only serve a year in jail on a crime. There were some exceptions to that. You could do consecutive sentences and do more time than a year, but typically a year max, or you go on to state prison. The offenses have been redefined, and people can now do their time in the county jail. It can be multiple years. It eliminated state prison, and I'm sorry, let's do this right. Put my eyes on. Oh, that's better. I can read it now. Okay, realignment eliminates state prison as a sentencing option for specified offenses. The term of confinement in jail is identical to state prison. As I mentioned, they get day-for-day credits. Felony probation can be awarded by the courts with or without incarceration. They can do a split sentence now. The judges can decide that they're going to do X number of days in custody, and then they're going to do X number of days in probation. They can split it up. And they can be in a situation where there's no supervision once they're released. Once they are termed out with us, they are released from custody with no supervision. They don't go to probation. They don't go to parole. They're done. They get to walk. Under realignment, the correctional administrator, that would be me, with the approval of the Board of Supervisors, may assign pretrial inmates to supervise out-of-custody programs. This was primarily written into the law to provide the sheriffs or the correctional administrator the ability to deal with overcrowding. This allows me to put people into a supervised release program voluntarily or involuntarily if they're pretrial inmates. These are people who are waiting to go to trial, waiting sentencing. Not waiting sentencing, waiting to go to trial. We can use electronic monitoring, radio frequency, or GPS. And a program violation, if they fail the program, equates to a new misdemeanor. We bring them back into custody. Post-release community supervision is, I'm sorry, put the glasses back on. Okay, these people are supervised by a county agency as designated by the Board of Supervisors. These are the people who were formerly parolees and are now PRCS. In our county, we designated the probation department to handle that. They are providing supervision. Incarceration for revocation is limited to 180 days in the county jail. There's a 3-year supervision term of the provision for early discharge. These people can get out early, get away from supervision early. It applies to all inmates released from state prison except commitment offenses. I'm sorry, I can't read my own writing tonight. Commitment offenses, serious or violent, third strikers, high-risk sex offenders, or mentally disordered offenders. These people will stay in the state prison system. Realignment defines community-based punishment as evidence-based sanctions with an emphasis on programming. Okay, the Community Corrections Partnership formed by this law recommends the local plan to the Board of Supervisors for implementation. We've already done that. Our plan's been approved. The board's agreed to it. We are now working the plan. As I mentioned a moment ago, it establishes an executive committee within the CCP with voting rights regarding the local plan. That's how we're managing the program, how we manage the money, how we make decisions on what we're going to do within the community. Funding is a very hot issue for us right now. I can tell you what we received so far. We received $150,000 in one-time funding for planning and technical assistance. We received $268,000. This is Solano County figures. $268,000 one-time to cover startup costs, and $3.8 million in the first year to fund the program. That was adjusted for the delay in starting AB 109. We were supposed to start July 1. It was delayed till October. That works out to about $7,800 per offender. I can boil that down for you a little bit to give you a comparison. The daily jail rate is $109 a day. That's what it costs us to care for someone in our custody, to provide, on an average, medical care, food, clothing, transportation, all the things we have to provide. $109 a day. We are getting, I think, $23 a day from the state. That's how it worked out. So we're in the hole here, right off the bat. There is reference in the law to future funding. There is no secure source of funding. No secure source of funding has been identified, and there's currently no constitutional protection of the funding. That is problematic. We're in the first year. We did receive the first year funding. There's no guarantee we'll get funding in the second year or the third year or the years after that. There is the potential of a ballot initiative on November. Don't know if that's going to pass or not. It's tied to a half-cent sales tax increase. I'm not thrilled with it. I think most of the voters are going to struggle with that. We're hoping that it will pass. It may not. I can tell you for a fact, if this funding ceases, we are in deep trouble. What little we have, we're trying to make the best out of it. If we lose that, we're going to go it alone, and the money just isn't there. And this is going to be extremely difficult for our communities because we're going to have to release these people. We won't be able to care for them. Some of my counterparts in other counties who are currently under court-ordered jail caps are in a situation now where they're so overcrowded, and with the legal cap on their population, as these people are sentenced to the county jail for a term of confinement, they're released the same day into some kind of out-of-custody program. Parolees who are violated are coming to these jails, and they're cited out back to their parole agent. They're not doing any time in jail. Now, we're not in that situation in Solano County. Thankfully, we have jail space. Not a lot of jail space, but we have some jail space. We're doing pretty well with balancing the population, but our numbers are growing. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation gave us an estimate of how many people would be released to us over a 3-year period. The Post-Release Community Supervision Group, which I affectionately refer to as parolees, because they were, we will have 356 of them at the end of 3 years. The non-non-nons, the non-significant offenders doing their prison time at county jail, we will top out at 280 in the county jail. And parole violators, we are expected to have 55 a day on an average. Right now we have about 100 and, what's the number again, 127? 100 what? 154. So we expected 55, we're at 154. So that number's a little off. We have to find out why that number was so far out. Our numbers are growing. We have a plan to deal with it. I have some jail space left at Clay Bank. We can open 2 closed down modules over time to make space for these people as our population continues to grow. And then in 2014, we hope to open a new 362-bed jail. We should break ground this summer on that jail. That jail is slated to open about the time we become completely full. So timing is going to be incredibly important here. If that jail is delayed, I will be stacking these people up on the floor. I will have no choice. I do have a choice. I can release them. I would choose to stack them on the floor. So that is public safety realignment in a nutshell. There's much, much more to it. It's a very complicated program. I'm not going to bore you with any additional detail. But what are we looking at in the future? Well, we know that the probation department is going to have to increase staff to manage the growing PRCS population. As those numbers continue to climb, probation will have to hire more people to go out and supervise them. The sheriff's office is going to hire more deputy sheriffs to go out and do compliance checks. We'll be assisting the probation department with those. They give us the names, they give us the addresses, and we go out and find out what these people are doing. We're working with our counterparts in the cities. We secured some money to work with the county police departments to help pay their overtime to go out with us. And for example, we went out with Fairfield and Suisun City last week, and we hit a number of PRCS releases in the community in the Fairfield-Suisun area, and it worked out very well. We're going to do that in Vallejo. We'll do it in Fairfield. We'll do it in Benicia, Dixon, Rio Vista, everywhere. And we'll continue to do that as long as necessary. We have taken some of this funding and we have developed a sheriff's enforcement team. We call it the SET team. It's a group of officers with a supervisor whose only purpose right now is to go out and pay attention to what these people are doing. And then they borrow resources from the cities and they all go together on a planned day. And they find out what these people are up to. And as long as they know we're watching, we hope we can keep most of them on the straight and narrow. A few have already failed, and we brought them back into custody. I'm also going to have to increase my correctional staff and open more facilities to manage the growing jail population. As I mentioned, the Clay Bank facility has bed space. We still have 200 plus beds available out there that we'll grow into. And then the new jail will come online in 2014. The biggest problem for us right now, and the biggest risk we have, is the loss of funding. I can't tell you how horrible that would be. It would be an absolute setback on this whole program because this is barely working now with the way it's funded. And I think the jury is still out as to how well it's going to work in the future. You know, I'm going to be very honest with you. This type of program has worked very well in other communities. They have been successful, and I think this program in California has some potential for success. But the programs that were done in other states, pardon me, they went through a very lengthy planning process involving all the stakeholders, and they sat down, they came together, they sat down, they discussed all the potential problems. They set funding up so that it was very well funded, and a lot of it was implemented over a period of as many as 10 years. In California, the planning process was extremely short. I wouldn't call it a planning process because most of us weren't at the table. The plan was put together in the governor's office. It was rolled out very quickly, and it was poorly funded. So we are going to have some problems for the first couple of years with this. We're going to struggle with this. I think what we have in the future is an opportunity here to do a better job than the state has done in the past couple of decades, but it's going to take us a little while to get balanced out. We've got to adjust to this. We've got to get used to it. We've got to find out how it works, make our changes, secure our funding. And over time, I think it really could be a benefit to public safety because we can change the way these offenders think, the way they interact in the communities. It will be better than what we were getting coming out of state prison. But it's going to take a lot of work to get there. So I don't want anybody to think that this is going to change overnight for the better. Honestly, I think it's going to get worse for a little while. I think we're going to see about 3 really tough years. And I think the community is going to be a little higher risk with this. We're going to try and minimize that risk, and then it'll start getting better. So I have hope for this program because, I mean, very honestly, I think we can do a better job than the state did. But it's going to take us a while to get there because we're handed a pretty ugly ball of wax here. And so we're dealing with it. We're going to take care of it, and we'll get it floating upright, and we'll make it work. But it's going to take a while. So anyway, Jack, do you want me to do questions now, or we want to move on?
Yeah, we need to move on. And
okay.
We'll have general questions at that point. So if I could call panel number 1 up, and there it's the discussion on how realignment is working in challenges. And you know who you are, so I'll let you get started.
Come on up. Let me find my notes. Yeah, I'm going to introduce you guys. Is that working? Too short for me. Okay, I always get these short ones to bend down. Our first panel is a discussion on how is realignment working and the challenges of realignment. We have Donna Robinson, our Interim Chief Probation Officer for the County of Solano. Thank you, Donna. Captain Gary Elliott from the Sheriff's Office. He's our Custody Division Commander. Patrick Duerte, our Director of Health and Social Services. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Gary, as well. We have Judge E. Bradley Nelson, the Assistant Presiding Judge for Solano County. And we have the very esteemed Chief Richard Word from the Vacaville Police Department. And what we're going to do here is let the panel describe to you how realignments are working so far. Now, we're very early into this, and we're only in the 4th or 5th month now. But we do have information for you, and you'll find in your folders, you'll find something that says "Got questions." If you have questions for the panel, would you please write your questions down so we can get those from you later, and then we'll bring those questions up, okay? Panel, it's all yours.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. As Sheriff Stanton said, my name is Donna Robinson. I'm the Interim Chief Probation Officer for the Solano County Probation Department. And I would like to start off by saying thank you for this opportunity to provide information to you regarding our department, what we're doing, and some updated information on the offenders that we've received under post-release community supervision. I first want to start off by really acknowledging and thanking my staff, because without their support, without their help, and without their dedication to the realignment efforts, it wouldn't be going in a positive direction. I do want to acknowledge two of the managers of the probation department, Jennifer Washington and Kelly Baldwin Johnson. They have been instrumental in assisting me as we've moved forward in this effort, so I did want to acknowledge them, as well as all of the staff in the probation department who are working on this effort. As we continue to implement realignment, we are really focusing on two distinct components. The first component is the compliance and the supervision aspect. Like in probation, our primary charge is to ensure community safety. So that is a component of realignment that we are extremely concerned about. As Sheriff Stanton noted, that we do participate in street enforcement and street enforcement tactics with the Sheriff's Department and other local law enforcement. Residency verifications, compliance checks are extremely important, and that's how we're making sure that, for one, the offenders reside in our county, and for two, we know where they're residing, and then three, we're able to locate them to provide supervision and connect them with needed services. In addition to the community safety support aspect, the treatment aspect is critical as well. We've done a great job in collaborating with our partners with Health and Social Services, as well as other community-based organizations, to ensure that once an assessment is completed and the interventions that are needed are targeted, that we can then refer those clients to needed resources. In your packet, there is a sheet that identifies some of the data points that we've collected through the probation department. There's several other data points that we collect on a regular basis, but these are some of the highlights that I wanted to take a few moments to just review. So this data that you have in front of you represents the time period of October 1st, 2011 through January 31st, 2012. And to date, we have received 306 packets. So we have received 306 packets from CDCR indicating that those offenders will be returning to Solano County. The second bullet, the state projections. In August of 2011, we received projections that indicated how many PRCS or post-release community supervision offenders we would receive. In August of 2011, that number was 157. In December, we received revised projections because the parole violator population was not included in the initial projections we received. So as of December 11th, our projections for the first 4 months of realignment is now 193. The number of offenders that have been required to report to probation is 196. The number who have actually reported to probation is 172. We have 16 no-shows, or they AWOL'd or failed to report for their appointment. When a client does fail to report, we do attempt to contact the offender by the phone number and the address they've provided. We've had some difficulty in verifying some of the addresses because not all of the information has been provided by CDCR. We have some offenders that when we get information in the packet from CDCR, they're transient. Or we get a street with no number address for a house. So those things we do have to clarify, we have to verify when we see the offender. And again, if an offender does not show up for an appointment, we are working with the Sheriff's Department to conduct residency checks. If the offender isn't located, then we are moving in the process of requesting bench warrants from the court. We do have a total of 18 offenders that have been transferred out of our county, and that means either they have secured residency in another county or they had no ties to Solano County other than they committed their crime in Solano County. If we're able to verify that they have residency in another county, we're going through the steps to properly transfer those cases. We've had one offender that has been transferred in. So another county determined that Solano County was the county of residence, and we accepted that case. We currently have 19 bench warrants that have been ordered, and the majority of those have been for failure to report to probation. In the city of residence, we broke down the cities in terms of the percentage of the total number of offenders and where they reside based on the residency address that was provided. 36% of our offenders reside in Vallejo, 34% in Fairfield, 20% in Vacaville, and then the other 4 cities in the county, Benicia, Dixon, Rio Vista, and Sassoon, make up 10%. The risk level for our offenders, and we use the LSCMI, which is the Level of Services Case Management Inventory System. And based on our assessment, it identifies the risk level of the offender as well as criminogenic needs or areas of treatment needs that are identified. In terms of our risk level, 15% of our clients are scoring at very high risk, 56% are scoring at high risk, 12% are scoring at medium risk, 2% low risk, and 15% are scoring as pending assessment. Does not mean that they don't have an assessment completed. It does mean that that information hasn't been put in our case management system in order for us to run a query. And in terms of the identified criminogenic needs, which are really the treatment needs that are coming out of the assessment for these offenders, the vast majority, there's some level of substance abuse treatment that's needed. We do have a percentage that are in need of mental health treatment as well as medication support. We have had several clients that have actually shown up at probation with a bag of medication where there's really no prescription, no real medication chart of how the meds should be taken. And we are working very diligently with Health and Social Services and Mental Health to get those offenders assessed and make sure the medication that they've received from CDCR is still an appropriate medication plan for them to have while they're in the community. And some of the other things that we are constantly doing is collaborating. And I think in one word that can sum up what the probation department is doing is just that. We're collaborating with law enforcement because, again, community safety is very important to us. We're collaborating with the treatment providers in the county through the Reentry Council as well as through Health and Social Services, Fighting Back Partnership, Youth and Family Services, some of the other county-based organizations that provide services that we would hope to refer for our offenders. And then the other thing that we're doing is we're actually collaborating to learn from other counties on how we can do things differently. I've been in constant communication, and some of the managers have been in communication with other chiefs that are working in realignment. We've also worked with other manager groups through our managers organization through the probation department to find out what are other ideas that they're using to implement this program and what could possibly work in Solano County. We take our new role very seriously. We're committed to making realignment a success. We continue to do a great job in dealing with our probation offenders. Some of these realignment clients we actually had as probationers. They weren't successful on probation and went on to prison. So we do have some historical information on some of those clients already. And we're just hoping that we can continue with increased staffing, which has been a challenge for us. We do have plans to bring on more staff in the very near future. And with that, we can then move forward with implementing evidence-based practices as we continue to do with our probation group, and also collaborate with our partners in making sure that this goes smoothly, or as smooth as possible. Thank you.
Okay, do I have time to check in on my Facebook page real quick?
No. Okay, do check Facebook.
Again, my name is Captain Gary Elliott. I work for the Sheriff's Office. I'm the Custody Division Commander, and I'm going to talk. That was quite well spoken, Donna. I'm going to talk primarily about jail capacity and our population trends inside the county jails, which is the primary population that the Sheriff's Office deals with. The Sheriff spoke about the N3s, the non-non-nons. These are folks that due to the redefining of what a felony is, they're doing their state time now in the county jails. And just to give you a quick statistic, since a realignment started on October 1st, we've had a total of 90 non-non-nons sentenced in Solano County. Today, or as of when this report was run, there are 72 of those that are still in custody, so the remainder, 18 or so, had completed their sentences based on credits or what have you and have subsequently been released. That represents a 9% of our current population the 1170s or the non-non-nons. The other big piece that the sheriff mentioned is the parole violation population. That's where we've seen a fairly precipitous increase in our population. Prior to realignment, the average daily population of a parole violator was somewhere in the neighborhood of less than 20 to 25 inmates. As we mentioned earlier, the population today is 154. So that's a pretty significant increase in that demographic of the jail population. That represents 19% of our current jail population. Now, I should break that down a little bit, because a person that's in on a parole violation could also have a new charge, a new violation, and so you really got to look at two pieces of that figure. So of the 154, roughly half are have a parole violation, but they also have a new charge, and that case is being adjudicated in the process. So they would arguably still be in custody prior to realignment while that case was pending anyway. Then the other half, the other 50%, are 3056 or parole violators only. That's their only holding offense. And that population is the true impact on the county jails with regard to the parole violation. And this comes from the fact now that parole violator does their violation in the county jail as opposed to state prison. And that number is roughly 75. Again, as I said, that's a precipitous increase from prior to realignment. We currently have 17 post-release community supervision violators in our facility. That represents 2% of our overall population. And year-to-date, or since October 1st, actually, when realignment went into effect, we've had through the jail 32 inmates or folks detained with a post-release community supervision violation. So in total, right now, we can calculate that approximately 30% of today's jail population is associated with AB 109 or realignment, based on the figures that we're tracking. To give you an idea, as the sheriff said, we're not releasing folks early or anything like that. Our current operational capacity is running at about 99%. The caveat to that is our operational capacity is not necessarily our rated capacity. We have more beds, but they're not staffed due to previous staffing shortages. So as the sheriff mentioned, we do have some room to expand in terms of the inmate population, but that will come with staffing increases. The Solano County implementation plan, the sheriff's piece of that included 8 correctional officers, and that's jail staff, and our primary strategy for addressing realignment is to open the west wing of our Claybank Sentence Detention Facility. That'll give us 80 additional beds, and we believe that will give us the capacity that we need through the rest of this fiscal year, and then we'll reassess for potentially expanding further into reopening Claybank next fiscal year. So again, as I said, our operational capacity is about 99%, and that's pretty much all I have.
Good evening, everybody. Patrick Duerte, Director of Health and Social Services. You can all hear me, I hope. I think one of the key things Gary mentioned earlier is the dollar amount that we're getting to take care of these individuals. $23, and it costs $109 to actually care for them in Gary's shop. One of the things that I've been a real strong critic of this program is that we cannot just turn our local prison versus state prison, turn our probation from parole, and try to do the same thing that they were doing before, because that's a definition of insanity. And so we have to do something very different. What Gary mentioned, that we've done a lot of things, a lot of planning on the fly, because this stuff just all came to us and we had to figure this out. The one piece of hope I do have is that as we've worked as a community corrections partnership, it does give me hope, because the people that are sitting at the table with me really do have the ability to think beyond just doing the same old thing, and we do have to do something different. So it really is a folly to think that transferring the responsibility to the counties is just going to solve the problems. So let me give you a backdrop of what's happening here in county land. That's just what's happening in your cities right now. With this recession that's hit us, in '07 we had 61,000 people who qualified for our benefits. They're actually received benefits back in '07. Right now, with the recession, we have over 77,000 individuals receiving benefits. Now you look at the population of Solano County, 421,000, you're talking 18%. We're almost talking about 1 in 5 people are receiving our benefits, and they have to have just minimal amount of income, minimal amount of assets to receive our benefits. A lot of them need it, but they just don't qualify it. We are hurting in this community, and we've got a new population of people coming into the community. And so in our department, we certainly feel the stress of that, but I want to tell you that we do really feel that there's hope in this program. I believe that this community can do better than what they were doing when they were releasing people from prison and back into our community. I think we can just do a better job. You know, health and social services, we clearly need to support our public safety agencies right out of the gate, because with everything getting thrown at us, we have to make sure this community feels safe. And so I think beefing up our DA, our probation office, and our sheriff's department is absolutely a very wise decision to start. But it isn't something that we can keep going, because as you know, as soon as, if we kept going in that way, we're going to be shutting down and sending people out. So we have to do something very different. So one of the things that some of the things that we want to do, we want to make sure that the community is safe, and we want to reduce recidivism, people coming, through the churning. We want to keep people out of jail, and we want to keep people stable in the community. It's a huge challenge, but we need to do it. We receive pennies on the dollar to provide the same services in the community which the state has provided, but we have to be smarter in building our services here in the counties. Employers are very reluctant to hire our people coming out of prison. They just don't want to deal with it. I talked with Robert Bloom, our Workforce Investment Board. He tells us there's employers that say, "I'll hire someone, but if you tell anybody I hired inmate, I will not use you again." It's that difficult for people to get a job. And so as far as all the cities that we have represented here, that's an attitude that has to change. We really do have to embrace giving people an opportunity to make it and to survive and to be successful and integrate into our community. It's really hard because it's a change. And it means in the past we've just been sticking people in jail. But if we really want to have a successful, safe community, we have to give people an opportunity to succeed. Rules that were there in the past may have to change. One of the rules that we have right now in our cash assistance programs, anybody who committed a drug felony cannot get cash assistance. Now think about it. You have people coming into a family, let's say a family of a wife and 2 kids, and they're coming out of jail, they're coming into that home, they have no benefits. And so what you have is instead of 3 people getting CalWorks benefits and all the assistance, you have 4. And talk about destabilizing family. And one of the things that I know a lot of law enforcement runs into is that financial reasons are the reasons why there's domestic violence and things like that. If there's no out for people to be successful, we're basically sunk. This thing is going downhill. That's one policy that we have to look at. We have to relook at a lot of the policies that we have that we're serving this population. Evidence-based practices are really key. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of programs out there in California, Texas, even Texas, that are really good programs that actually work and keeps the community safe and people don't keep churning. We have to look at those kinds of programs because I think we can make a difference there. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have to have a recovery-oriented community in custody and in the community, so people transition with a treatment plan while they're in and coming out. Just the last few things is that we have to use the money wisely because we have so little of it. But we have to get the community involved. Now, the ministers have come to me several years ago and said, there's people showing up at our door and we don't know what to do with them. Well, we started to tighten our bond with them. The reentry council that was formed, that really was formed because it was a necessity here in Solano County. We got some strengths. We have a medical waiver for indigent population with Medi-Cal, so now the federal government is picking up half the cost. That's a good thing. One of the things also that we've done is integrate mental health and substance abuse into our Medi-Cal program. And so that means when people come in for physical health, their cost for mental health and substance abuse services will get covered. We're going to bring everything to the table to make this thing work, and what I need from the community is really a lot of support. The business community and all of you really need to kind of get behind what we're doing. There's going to be some rough waters ahead, but I think you have a real good team working with Chief Ward and the other chiefs, and everybody around the table, Gary and the staff at Probation. We've got a great team that I think all have the same goal of keeping people safe, but we have to develop a program that's alternative to what the state did. We can beat the 70% recidivism rate. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm up next. I'm a judge. My name's Brad Nelson. You see the E there. I'm a judge in the Solano Superior Court. I'm one of the 7 judges in our court that does felony trials, sentencing, preliminary hearings. So I have a criminal assignment. And in case any of you are wondering, none of you probably are, but the E stands for Earl, so my name is Earl. In terms of, I was kind of asked to, by our presiding judge, Judge Paul Beeman, to attend this in his absence. And I think it probably makes more sense for one of the criminal judges to speak here than for our presiding judge to speak. As a court, right now we are dealing with 2 of the 4 realignment populations that Sheriff Stanton mentioned. The 2 we're dealing with are the people who are convicted of felonies after October 1st who can no longer be sent to prison to serve their sentence but have to be sentenced to the county jail. And so the minimum sentence, with one exception which I won't go into, for that type of person is 16 months in county jail. The maximum can go, as you've heard in some counties, can in some cases get over 20 years. I don't think any of our judges have imposed a sentence yet, at least, that's over 6 years, maybe 6 or 7. I'm not sure what the 8. 8's the max that the maximum sentence that our sheriff has seen so far. And under the sentencing rules in terms of credits, a person sentenced to jail for 8 years will do 4 years in custody. And if they're sentenced to jail for 8 years and it's not what we call a split sentence, which I'll explain in a moment, then when they're released after doing 4 of that 8 years, they're released. They're not supervised by anyone. The one exception is if a felon is sentenced to county jail, but a portion, we call it, the statute refers to it as a concluding portion of the sentence, is suspended and the person is placed on what's called mandatory supervision. It's different than the community supervision, but it's similar. It's on terms that are generally like terms and conditions of probation. They're supervised by the probation department. And they're out in the community being supervised by probation and serving the remainder of their county jail sentence. They get credit against their sentence for the time they're in the community, but they don't get what we call the conduct credit. So they don't get, they don't do half time while they're on this supervision. So far, our judges have not imposed very many split sentences, probably less than 5. Our probation department hasn't yet recommended many. And I think part of that is maybe philosophical. Part of it may be just because it's taking everybody time to adjust to this process. But I think most judges feel that if a person should have a split sentence, then maybe they would be better served by being tried on probation first before a sentence is actually imposed. So that's one of the populations are the felons, the newly convicted felons who get sentenced to county jail instead of state prison. Some examples of that, just to give you some examples. You've heard the phrase non. I'll exclude the attorneys, Ms. Caldwell, Mr. Duerte, Mr. Dubain. Who knows what that means, non. Okay, show of hands, anybody? You know all of them, okay. So that's fewer than half of you know what that means. What it means is somebody who doesn't have either a previous or a current felony conviction that is either a serious felony under California law, a violent felony under California law, or requires them to register as a sex offender. What's a serious and violent felonies are felonies that qualify as strikes under California's 3 strikes law. So things like murder, robbery, carjacking, child molestation, rape, those kinds of things. First-degree burglary, which is burglary of a house, as opposed to second-degree burglary of like a store or a business. So those are the first 2 nons, and then the other non is the non-sex registrants. So that's what we mean by non-nons, and that's one of the populations in terms of sentencing our court is currently dealing with. The second group is just starting to come to the party in our courts, and those are the parolees who are not on parole but are on this post-release community supervision. So those are people who have served time in prison and are now released to be supervised by their probation department. And we've had a few of those folks come our way so far. I suspect that more are in the wings. Most of the ones we've dealt with so far are the group that Ms. Robinson mentioned, the people who fail to report to probation upon release from prison. And just so you know, when they're released from prison, they're required by CDCR to sign a 1-page agreement that has kind of general terms and conditions, including search and seizure, and requires them to report to their county probation department within 2 or 3 business days. And so those people who fail to report, those are the first group we've seen. We've seen a few who have also reoffended, who have been charged with new crimes. There's a third potential population that we will, as a court, be getting starting in July of next year, and those are the parolees who are not on post-release community supervision but are still being supervised by state parole. Starting July 1st of 2013 under this realignment legislation, the courts will start serving as parole revocation officers, and so we'll be conducting hearings to see whether those people stay on parole or get taken off parole. But we don't have to deal with those people yet. Our sheriff, however, is dealing with the parolees as of right now, because a lot of those parolees now are serving when their parole is revoked by the state parole authority, they're serving their time in the jail. So those are our populations, and I'll echo Sheriff Stanton's remarks about the lack of statewide planning for this process. It took almost every judge in the state by surprise. Nobody in the judicial branch was ever consulted about this program or this realignment legislation. Now, there may have been a few exceptions, but it was pretty much sprung on the courts as well as the district attorneys and the public defenders and the probation departments. Part of the reason for that had to do with the federal lawsuits dealing with prison overcrowding and the failure of California prisons to deliver adequate medical care to the inmates. And the state was under a couple of federal court orders, I believe, to reduce the state prison population by I think, a little over 30,000 inmates by December 31st of 2011. And this, I think, was the mechanism to accomplish that in that period of time, and also why there wasn't perhaps as much planning or preparation as maybe other states enjoyed. It's also a little bit ironic. I looked at the flyer for our summit here. Talks about the state of California that changed the way it handles the incarceration and rehabilitation of low-level criminal offenders. There's a bit of sophistry there, a bit of wordplay. Well, what do you mean by low-level criminal offenders? If you look at the handout that Ms. Robinson just read to you about the 172 post-release community supervision folks who have already reported to probation, 71% are assessed as either a high risk or a very high risk to reoffend. So low-level offender doesn't mean low-risk offender. Reoffend doesn't mean necessarily get convicted of a new offense, just means to commit a new crime. There are definitely and will continue to be challenges with how the community, the courts, the various agencies deal with these folks. I think it seems very unlikely to me personally, at least, seeing how government in California has grown year after year, to believe that the amount of money the state cuts the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation by will be less, or will be equal to the amount of money it gives us to implement this realignment. And I mean, the figure $100 a day to care for somebody versus $20 from the state to pay for that care means there's been an incredible shift to the cities and the counties to take responsibility and deal with this issue. That is a challenge for everybody. The other aspect, and I'm not trying to rain on the realignment parade, because I think ultimately it's a good thing. Local control is probably better than state control in terms of dealing with people who are actually in your communities. You have a vested interest in making it work. And I'll echo the remarks. I haven't attended many of these meetings, but there certainly seem to be a lot of dedicated people who have possible or proposed solutions, who are interested in making this work. And you know, I hope it's a successful thing, because if it's not, it'll anyway. If it's not, I'll just leave that hanging. And I can't talk about specific cases in my court. It would just be improper for me to do that. But when we talk about people who are eligible either for post-release community supervision, some of these, I'll call them parolees for the sake of argument or for the sake of the discussion, you know, they have been in prison for years. And so they're released back into the community. A lot of them may have been tried on probation initially and failed and then been sentenced to prison. They're released back into the community, and the hope is that they will be successfully re-entered, rehabilitated, not re-offend. Having a lack of funding to facilitate that is problematic. But some of these people may not have strike convictions. That is, they may not have been convicted of a robbery. However, they may have committed a robbery and just had it plea bargained down to what we call a grand theft person, which makes them a non. Others may have been in prison for off and on for 20 or 30 years and may have gone to prison 6 or 7 times for property offenses, theft crimes, second-degree burglaries, those kinds of things that would qualify them for county jail sentencing now. But they're, you know, they are convicts, basically. That's their mindset. That's their life they've lived. And those are difficult people to reintegrate into a community. So there's some real challenges here. There are a few that I think have significant mental health issues. Now, when a parolee, when somebody's released from prison in the past and who's crazy or close to being crazy, and they appear before the parole board could return them to prison, and in the prison setting, the Department of Mental Health had inpatient psychiatric units, they had outpatient psychiatric units, they had psychiatrists there that could prescribe medication. I don't think we yet have in place that kind of structure for those kinds of former inmates. So there are some challenges. There are some issues that have not yet been addressed, and in the low money, and I don't know if they will be, I'm sure they will be at some point in time, either by the appellate courts or by legislation or both. We talk about the cost. You have people who have committed felonies in different counties. Now, in the past, if they got sent to prison by a judge in Yolo County and by a judge in Sacramento County and a judge in LA County, those sentences, even though they came from different counties, were all served under, could all be served under one continuous commitment. Now under 1170H, we're going to be facing the issue of the competing jurisdictions, the competing jails. So a judge in Yolo County sentenced somebody to 16 months in the Yolo County jail, and then that person, while they're serving that sentence, is then sentenced to, let's say, 8 months in the Solano County jail consecutive to their Yolo County jail time. So where are they going to serve that time? Who's going to pay for it? And the counties who have jails that are overcrowded, they're not going to want to be paying to incarcerate those folks. I don't think the legislation to date has addressed that issue. Another issue that kind of is out there, and Captain Elliott I know the sheriff's working on this, but when people were sentenced to state prison, and let's say they had stolen money or injured somebody, so there was a restitution order of, say, $5,000 or $6,000 or $10,000, and there's something called a restitution fund fine that's imposed by a judge. It could be as little as $200, it could be as much as $10,000, and the money collected would go into this statewide fund to compensate crime victims for their losses. Well, people sentenced to prison, serving sentences, the California Department of Corrections would collect money from them. It might be money that their family members put on their books so they could buy food in the prison. CDCR would take a percentage of that and pay it to the state towards this restitution. There's no provision right now for any of that to occur in the county jail. So it's going to be a little bit problematic to see crime victims being reimbursed for their injuries. Now, I don't know realistically how much restitution, what percentage was ever recovered, because a lot of offenders just don't have the money to pay. But still, it's an issue. In terms of, I'm going to wrap it up because I've probably gone too long already. In terms of some of the maybe unintended consequences that some counties are experiencing, I don't know that Solano has experienced this yet, but I've heard that in these 1170H county jail sentences to county jail instead of state prison, they qualify under California law as a prior prison commitment. So if the person is released from jail, commits a new felony within 5 years of being released, they can be charged with an enhancement that would add 1 year of time to their future commitment. So we call that a prison prior. Some of the people coming out of CDCR on these post-release community supervision have 4, 5, or 6 prison priors if they reoffended within 5 years of their release. In some counties, apparently, there's plea bargaining that is taking place where the district attorney says, look, I'll let this person plead to this count, but you have to agree, or he has to agree, not to be put on probation. He has to agree to be sentenced under 1170H, but will agree to a split sentence. So he'll do 120 days in jail, 4 months in jail, and then he'll do 12 months on mandatory supervision at home if he behaves, and that's a total of 16 months, and then that'll count as a prison prior, but in effect, they're on probation after serving their county jail sentence. I haven't seen that in our county yet, but I've heard of several other counties where certain prosecutors are doing that. There are some defendants, I think, who are sentenced to county jail who are finding out that it's not maybe the best place to serve time, particularly when the jail is overcrowded. Now, the prisons, when they were overcrowded, that wasn't a great situation either. But in general, in many of these state prisons, the inmates would have a cell. They'd probably be double celled. They'd have a roommate. But during the day, in most of the what they call tiers or units, their cells would be unlocked. They could walk up and down the hallway. They could go down to what's called a day room and watch TV. There would be some programs available to them. And then in many of the facilities, depending upon the level of custody level that they were at and the facility was at, the actual units would be unlocked and they could go into other units, or they could go down to a recreation area they call a yard or whatever. I'm not sure our jail is similarly equipped. And so some of the county jail inmates are having difficulty with that, and it's something for the courts to consider as well. There may be we may find defendants who are just going to end up rejecting probation and say, no, just sentence me, Judge, because I know if you sentence me to 2 years, I'll do a year and then I'll be cut loose and be done with it. I won't be supervised.
Excuse me, Your Honor.
You're going to cut
I know
in,
we'd
that's
all like
fine.
to continue to hear from you, but we are running really far behind, and we still have
Okay.
Chief Ward to make some comments. So, Chief, if
Okay,
you would,
sorry,
please.
Chief.
No,
I'm done.
thank you. I'll be brief. I just have a few comments, really. I do agree with many of the comments said. The impact on police officers, I mean, for the most part, they won't see a difference because many of these are the same people we'll see anyway. We've seen these folks. Many of these folks that have come out on post-release community supervision, they don't even know their own status. You know, we ask them on the street, you know, are you on parole, probation? And they fumble for an answer and they say, no, I'm on diversion. So, I mean, it's new for all of us. But instead of, we still have, thankfully, a parole officer that's embedded in our agency working with us, so we still have that relationship. The positive thing for us is we know each other in the county, and if there's a hiccup, we can call the probation department, we can call the sheriff's department, we can call the DA and deal with those issues rather quickly versus having to call the state, and it may take a while to get an answer when you call that big agency. I think our community corrections partnership is certainly a good, strong, diverse group. We don't always disagree, and we voice that, so I think that's healthy for us in the county. The challenges, as the sheriff mentioned, that concern me are the real potential. I don't think we can sustain these 8-year sentences at the county jail. They're not equipped for that. So jail overcrowding is a real concern, especially if the sheriff is forced to release people early. He has to make a call, so that's a heavy burden, a political burden he has to carry. Which people does he let out the door? That's big. We're still talking in the partnership about the services we provide. I think we know what services are needed: substance abuse, mental health, employment, and so we need to get those online. I think that's key. We don't have the jail space. Our police departments across the county have been reduced in size, and unemployment in the county is still high. So I think these services are even more critical, more so than before. I'm concerned, too, when we begin to ramp up police staffing, maybe a while, maybe 5-10 years, but at some point we're going to begin to hire the police officers, some of the police officers that we've lost and the deputy sheriffs that we've lost in the county. And once that happens, that will put an even bigger burden on the courts, the DA, the public defender, and of course our jail. One thing I think we'll have to do, in our agency now, we used to just conduct sweeps on parolees, not thinking about jail capacity or prison capacity. And now I think we have to think about that. I mean, if I know after meeting the sheriffs at capacity, we may need to rethink a sweep. If I'm planning a sweep the next day, I may need to talk to him or talk to my colleagues to see, you know, how we might do this. So it's something I'm thinking about. I like that we're thinking of alternative, less labor-intensive alternatives, such as GPS tracking. I like that. Flash incarceration, where you lock someone up for a short period of time. Hopefully you can force them to get the services and stay with the services they need. And the day reporting center is another consideration that the partnership's discussing. And I think we have to be very nimble. I think Patrick used that word before. If we're seeing, and I know Supervisor Spearing said this, if we're seeing issues occur in our city, maybe homelessness or increase in domestic violence, I think as a partnership we have to act quickly to make adjustments to our programs. And I think, too, we have to evaluate these programs. If we see programs and police sweeps, if they're not effective, we should stop it and do something else that works. Thank you.
All right, thank you, panel, very much. I'm going to ask you to hold your questions anyway. We'll hold our questions.
That's not my fault.
It's never the judge's.
I'll ask you to hold your questions until the end, and then we'll get them answered for you. Judge Nelson, I appreciate your comments, especially about. Go ahead. I really appreciate your comments related to how we define non-significant offenders. In the state of California, that could very well be anyone below Charlie Manson could be insignificant. For us, that's a very big problem. One thing I forgot to mention when I was up there, I did mention that the state transferred the population to us, a good portion of it. They did transfer the responsibility to us, the expense to us. They also transferred the risk. We have all that risk now, and we're trying to deal with it. But all the lawsuits are now going to come our way. All the litigation is ours. Okay, I have a job to do here. Our next presentation is from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And before I do that, a little bit of background. Sheriffs have worked with folks from CDC, now called CDCR, for many, many years. I have a lot of history working with the Department of Corrections. And we've always had a good working relationship. But they did their state thing and we did our county thing. And once in a while we met in the middle. But we all got along. And we did okay. I mean, we complained about the parolees sometimes, how long it took them to come and get them. And yes, I did threaten to zip tie them to the fence at the prison one time. But, you know, we always worked well together. Well, one thing that has come out of realignment is a huge improvement in our relationship. We work with the Department of Corrections almost every day now. We have had a lot of time together. I work on at least 3 committees right now that are also populated by CDCR staff on just dealing with these kinds of issues and other issues around the state. We have a lot of interaction, and we have really formed a good, solid partnership. And our next guest is a big, big part of that. Tanya Rothschild is a 20-year veteran of the Department of Corrections. She's the Associate Warden, Chief Classification Services Unit, Division of Adult Institutions, California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Would you put that on 2 business cards and tape them together? How do you do that? Where are you, Tanya? Oh, there you are, back there. Thought you moved on me. Thank you. Tanya currently serves as the CDCR liaison with the 58 California counties on processes related to the post-release Community Supervision Act of 2011, and in that capacity, we deal with her constantly. Thank you for your patience with us. It's been a learning process for all of us, but I have a chance now to say thank you, so please accept that on behalf of all the sheriffs. It's been a pleasure working with CDCR on this, this whatever it is. And I'll turn it over to you.
It's a great undertaking. I have with me today Darby Kernan. She's the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Corrections Legislative Office, and so many of you know her in her capacity previously at the Capitol. And I'm going to let Darby start so she can address some of the issues relative to funding and some of the discussions that have already been occurring with the prior panel members, and she's chomping at the bit. And I just told her I think it's good that we actually had good timing because all the knives are removed from the table before the state came up to speak. So after Darby kind of covers those components of the realignment, then I'll let you know what's been going on with corrections and kind of where we're moving forward.
Hi, you guys. Thank you very much. I've had the opportunity, actually, I used to work for State Senator Wesley Chesbrough, and so I had the opportunity to work with many people in Solano County over the years. So I want to thank you for inviting us here today, but also thank you guys for your commitment to realignment as a success, because actually Solano County has been doing an amazing job of implementing realignment. We're dealing with 58 different counties, but I have to tell you, Solano County is one of the most amazing counties, and they have done an amazing job in implementing and dealing with the different issues that come up daily with realignment. Now I will apologize, though, because I am going to clarify some things that were said just during the presentations. I was able to work on drafting and passing realignment, all of the several bills that did it. And so I want to start with, in January last year, Governor Brown did talk about implementing public safety changes. And at that point, Secretary Matt Cate put together a group from all of these different stakeholders to start talking about what do we do? What are the options out there? It included the Sheriff's Association, the District Attorneys Association, the police chiefs. Judicial Council was brought on a little later in it. But there were definitely stakeholders that CDCR deals with, chief probation officers, that we all sat down and kind of said, what are the options out there? Because as you guys have all talked about, there was a perfect storm that was something had to happen. So while everything was on a very expedited pace, there were definitely conversations that were occurring with state associations and them talking with their members about what was being discussed. With that, funding piece of everything. So the funding for realignment is while it is not constitutionally protected, it is a continuous appropriation with a line item that cannot be changed unless the legislature passes it and Governor Brown signs that. So the funding source, which is partial VLF and a 0.5% sales tax and all of those other things, is dedicated to public safety realignment. There has to be an action to stop that. The formula for realignment was a one-year formula. And that's because realignment was new and nobody knew should we put a permanent formula into place. So they did a 10-month formula because realignment was delayed until October. The new money, so realignment was initially $400 million. It grows to over $800 million this year and goes to over $1 billion in next year. All of the allocation that every county received last year, they will get in the next year. What CSAC and Department of Finance and the legislature will be doing this year is looking at the growth money. So that extra $400 million, how is that allocated out? And do you look now at different formulas? Do you look at counties like Solano who didn't send as many people to prison and figure out ways to reward those counties versus the counties who have sent people to prison in droves over the years? So that's being discussed and looked at now. But the constitutional protection is important, but Governor Brown has said as long as he is in office, he will not sign any legislation that would take away the funding to realignment. And I have to be honest with you, the legislature is not inclined to do that either. This is a huge change in public policy, and they want to see this succeed as well. So just with that, I also want to talk about realignment as a whole. When you talk about your jail capacity filling up, it's true. And if everybody keeps arresting and sending people to jail as they did to prison, you don't have enough money. Nobody will. Realignment is about doing it differently. It's about looking at alternatives, and it's about treating the people from your community. They came from your community, they came to state prison. They had failed on probation, they came to prison. They get out of prison, they come back to your community, and they're on parole in your community. So it's not that these are state felons being served in your jail, these are your felons. And these are not state parolees, these are your community supervised people. And I told you I apologized already, so, but it is very true, and I believe very strongly in that the state.
They didn't tell. I couldn't tell.
The state is working in a partnership with all of the communities, but these people are coming from your communities, and we have to look at dealing with it differently. We have, I'd like to say, a 66% recidivism rate, not 70, and you can do it better. That's what the governor believes, and even as CDCR, we believe it too. We know if people are helped locally, they're going to succeed. So I just wanted to kind of clarify those few points, and then I'll let Tanya do all the real talking.
She's good? Okay. See, I got to drive home with her. So. First, I wanted to say that Chief Stanton did a great job of doing an overview of how we got here, I guess with the exception of the money. So it's been an incredible challenge. And just to go back and indicate what the governor was faced with in looking at the decision in the Supreme Court relative to the overcrowding in California prisons, the option just simply was not going to be to let anybody go early. And though while there's miscommunication through the press or what have you about folks getting released early, as everyone who has sat up here as a speaker has indicated, this wasn't an opening of the doors. There was no buses driving from prisons over to the jails, and nobody left any earlier than they otherwise would have been scheduled to leave. So what the state was hard-pressed to do, as with the stakeholders that we worked with, was to figure out, okay, we need to look at who's coming in. How do we address this overcrowding without making some seriously poor mistake about just releasing people due to the loss of this monumental litigation? And it was something all the states were looking at, because many states are facing what we're facing. And so we looked at who could potentially not come in. Could we look at the prisons as housing people who were committing more of the serious crimes, who had a history of committing the serious crimes? So as he indicated, who comes in the front door are those offenders who either have a current or prior serious or violent offense or required to register as a sex offender. Those nonnies don't qualify, right? So they're the ones who would be retained in the jail for new prison convictions, or now new county jail convictions. And then the other folks who couldn't come into the door are the parole population, right? So that's a big discussion, and it's something that the sheriff was talking about, is facing challenges, as well as the captain was in the jail, is the parolees that are now coming to the jail. Well, the Department of Corrections, in its immense overcrowding, was bringing in parole violations constantly into our jails. And these folks could serve up to 12 months, but served an average of 3.5 months in prison. And so they never really left the reception centers. They weren't getting any of the programming. And the severe overcrowding, we weren't being able to provide programs to the offenders either. So we were doing approximately 80,000 parole violations a year. And so I'm not the 70% recidivism rate person. I'm not the 67% recidivism rate person. I'm the person who says, did you know that California is one of the very few states in our nation that puts post-supervision on every single person who goes to prison? That's why we have such a high recidivism rate in our state, because we actually take the time to supervise more people when they leave our prisons, where other states don't put people on post-release supervision. So when you talk, that really throws off your recidivism numbers. So when we stopped the doors on the parole violators on October 1st with the realignment, it was an immediate impact, prison reduction for our overcrowding. It wasn't as high as indicated in our first few months. By January 31st, we had a reduction of about 17,000 offenders. And that is still very, very significant, because it's really about who's not coming in and churning out in those first few days and months. And now it's also the offenders who the judge explained are coming in on the commitments on 1170H. So as we go through the next year and couple of years, we're really seeing the significant reduction, not just with our offenders, but now with our staff as well. And so that's what we're hitting in CDCR, is a shift in how we do business as well. So like Darby was indicating, the state's changing the way it does business in the counties, and we're changing the way we do business in the state. So there's a lot going on with our department, and I don't want to spend the few moments we have talking about that. I would like to take the time to talk about some of the great collaboration that's been going on in your county, as well as in the state on the public safety realignment. Chief Robinson did a great job explaining some of the impacts to probation, but I believe she actually might have minimized it. Probation across the state has been significantly impacted, and they're doing an amazing job of getting the job done. Whereas they used to have one component of probationers to supervise, they now have three. They have three they have to look at differently. They have different types of revocation for each one, and they need a growth in that, how to supervise that population, and you need to pay particular attention into that area, because that's the area where you do it differently. And their team has been amazing in representing your county and getting that done. We work with probation in our department to advise, and we did pre-up work with the Chief Probation Officers Association extensively as we could in the quick expedited processing of the PSR, to plan what would be the information in the pre-release packets. How would we be able to facilitate that process? And it's been a struggle between probation and the state. We're having to speak, learn to speak the same language. What are the documents? What does this mean? What are these different mental health programs you have offenders in? And how do I read this information? We did statewide trainings, conferences. We do weekly conference calls for the first 4 months. And we're really trying to collaborate. And no more, one good thing, I would say, not one, but one significant thing that has happened out of the realignment, like the sheriff said, was the collaboration between the county and the state has significantly improved, and we're really working together as a law enforcement arm of the state. Where we had items that we worked with before, now we're really significantly impacting each other and trying to find ways to improve that communication. But as I've traveled around the state over the last couple of months and met with various counties and county probation departments and sheriffs, it's been amazing to see the collaboration just within your own counties. How areas that maybe didn't even talk or understand what the other components did as much really care, and see how you interlink. And the panel that was up here tonight really proved that for your county, and how well your representatives are doing and talking to each other and planning the impacts of your county. The other significant item that I noticed in listening to the panel was the fact that you're doing a great job in the fact that you're not having to kick people out of your jails yet. Many counties are. They're faced with the overcrowding. So you've positioned, you're in a good position already with that. I do want to touch just briefly on a couple of items that Judge Earl had said. With the mandatory sentences, again, that's another impact for probation when your judges do begin to sentence them to split sentences. And that is an interesting component, and also another alternative for the state in not just incarcerating offenders and giving them the option to serve part of it in the community. So it is a good option. But one of the items you also talked about was the low-level offenders and the high risk. And I think that's where it comes into play, even for us in the Department of Corrections, as we look at the offenders that repeat. They often are. We determine a person by low level when we think of our public safety, because oftentimes we say, well, the drug offenders are maybe a low-level offender. And then there's a lot of controversy of whether or not they should be going to prison anyway, or whatever the position may be. But when you do your risk assessments and you complete a risk assessment, oftentimes it's the drug offenders who have the repeat offenses who then are ranked as the higher risk offenders. So sometimes the lower risk offender is the the lower level offender is really the higher risk offender to recidivate because of the substance abuse program. substance abuse problem, which is why the programs and the opportunity with the realignment can really help us as a community and help us as a state to find some diversionary means instead of just locking people up in prison and getting them into the right programs or finding the right way to touch them. And it's harder to do when you're so large as the Department of Corrections is. So I think you have great challenges ahead, but I think you have good means ahead. And as Darby said, the money is coming. It's here. It's not scheduled to stop. It actually have to have an act to stop. And I just wanted to express, too, that the Department of Corrections, we're going through, like I said, our own struggles and facing our own challenges with having to lay off our staff and relook at the offenders and figure out how to shift and house the type of people we have now. We have massive movement going on in the prisons to realign who's left in the institutions, and changing over reception centers where we're not getting as many people in now to general population facilities. There's a lot going on in our department. But we remain steadfast and committed to working with probation on our transition. Our parole is continuing to work with the sheriffs and reaching out on their transition. And as you know, we have more transition ahead with the courts in 2013. But we hope that through our collaboration, like somebody said, it's not going to be easy, but we'll at least make it a little bit of a smoother process. And we didn't, throw them out and say, that's it, we don't want to be involved, because the reality is it's still our state too. It's still our communities too. While we may work for the state, we live in your communities, and we all want to do what's best, for the citizens of our great state and for all of us as well and our families. So with that, I won't get into my preaching. I don't know how much more Darby wanted to cover. If you have any questions for us relative to any of the components that we're working on. Oh, one more thing.
In a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
One more thing I wanted to point out too was one component of the realignment that I'm not sure was covered, and that is a positive change and not just doing business as usual, is that previously, prior to the realignment, when a parole violator would be revoked, they could be revoked for up to a year in prison. And the length of revocation has changed to 6 months, and now they all receive good time credit. So the longest a person would stay in jail now for revocation is 3 months, unless they had some misbehavior that would take the good time credit away from there. Whereas some just had flat 12 months when they were in prison. So there are also positive behavior discharge statutes that were implemented with the realignment. So some of it isn't just shifting and now you get our lengthier stay revocation individuals. There were other components in there that were changed as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Clearly, we have some different perceptions here on how this rolled out, but I think what's important is that we're actually working together to make this realignment thing work. So I appreciate Darby's comments, and do a good job of protecting the governor. Okay, I'm going to call up our second panel, please, for a discussion on best practices, concepts, and what's next. We have with us tonight Mary Butler, the Chief Probation Officer of Napa County. Hi, Mary. Good to see you again. How are you? And with Mary is Chris O'Dell from the Choices Program. It's an in-prison treatment program in San Mateo. The floor is all yours.
Evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Terry Amsler. I work with the Institute for Local Government, which, as you may know, is the nonprofit research and education arm of the League of California Cities and the California State Association of Counties. And I'm pleased to help out tonight with some light moderation, basically, of the panel. And we're going to do some introductions briefly. We're going to have presentations by the panelists for probably a total of 30 minutes or so, and then we'll go questions and answers, I think, for everybody that's spoken tonight, I think, if I understand what will happen next. So let me do, just by way of introduction, let me say the panel, it focuses on promising practices, programs, services, sort of how to make some of this work around realignment and reentry work. And I think interestingly, I think tonight on the panel, we have folks with some very different perspectives in this system, which I think will be helpful for you to hear. So let me do some very brief introductions, and Chris is going to help me out also. Mary Butler, center of the table, is the Chief Probation Officer of Napa County. Been the Chief Probation Officer for 9 years, been with the county for almost 30. Majority of her time with the county was at Health and Human Services. Previous to coming to probation, she was the Manager of Child Welfare Services and Mental Health for Napa County, has a master's degree in counseling, as a licensed marriage and family therapist, has been working with stakeholders in Napa County for the last 5 years, implementing evidence-based practices in the criminal justice system. To Mary's right is Chris Odell, a native of San Francisco, in Bayview. Currently, he's a supervisor with the Choices program in San Mateo County, and he will do a better job explaining this. I'll just say that it has something to do with being a Delancey Street model addressing substance abuse based on the belief that change is possible by learning to internalize honesty, responsibility, and integrity, and rethinking old values and attitudes. And Chris, perhaps you can introduce the other two panelists.
I have, to my right, can everybody hear me now? Much better. I have to my right Damon Kasparian, who is one of our success stories, and I'll go ahead and I'll let him at the point that he'll speak explain to you his journey. And to my left, I have Melanie Raperto, correct? And she is also one of our success stories, and she will go ahead and talk about her journey as well.
So we'll begin with Mary, and Mary, in about 10 minutes, I'll give you the high sign.
Okay. Well, thank you for having this panel tonight to kind of give a little different perspective. Napa County, as you heard, I'm the Chief Probation Officer. I didn't come into the probation world the way the majority of Chief Probation Officers did. I really did grow up in Health and Human Services, so I bring kind of a different perspective to the world of probation. I have always been interested in rehabilitation and programming and doing things a little bit differently. So all of this happening sort of came at a good time for Napa County. And Darby, I'm going to take what you said with the state has a 66% recidivism rate and the counties can do it better, and I'm here to be one of those counties that says yes we can and we are doing it better. And it's early in realignment, so we're not 100% fully in the realignment world, but we have been working on this for a number of years. In Napa County, we had a jail issue about 5 years ago. Our jail was full. And we are one of 2 counties that our jail is not run by the Sheriff's Department. We have a civilian jail. We have a separate Department of Corrections. However, that being said, it's still a jail. It's still run like a jail. And if our Director of Corrections was here, he would be saying what I'm going to say next, which is our jail is really old and decrepit and falling apart and not designed to be a treatment facility. That's not what it was built to do. It really someday needs to be rebuilt and in a different way. But at the moment, even with the jail that we currently have, we've actually been able to do some very innovative programming in this building that was clearly not designed to do that. And the way we did that was we brought all of our stakeholders together in a criminal justice committee, like I said, about 5 years ago, well before the Community Correction Partnership was ever invented. And so we've been meeting and having some of the discussions that in many counties have only started recently with the Community Corrections Partnership. But we all came to the agreement long ago that if we did business the same way we've always done business, we're going to have a full jail, we're going to have lousy outcomes, and we're just going to be beating our head against the wall. So we decided to start doing things differently and tried to move our entire criminal justice system into an evidence-based model. And when we looked at what we had and what we didn't have, it became very clear that yes, we had probation officers, yes, we had some jail beds, full, but we still had a jail, and we had law enforcement that was working the streets and doing a really good job at the front end. But what we didn't have was a whole lot about that rehabilitation piece, and we really needed to work on that and make some changes. And if we're really going to do rehabilitation, we had to do it in a way that made sense. We've all done the same thing over and over again. I'm with you, Patrick. You know, we know what insanity is. So we really wanted to do it different. So we pulled a subcommittee together of all of the partners, the police, the sheriff, our jail, district attorney, public defender, probation, health and human services, our county exec's office, board of supervisors, judges, And we sat at a table and came to the conclusion that we needed a day reporting center. Now, if you build a day reporting center where people come and check in a box and say they came and then they go off and do whatever they do, you will fail miserably. But you could do that. I mean, there are a number of those throughout the country that's what a day reporting center is, literally. You go, report, you leave. We didn't want one of those. We wanted a program that actually could change someone's life and change their behavior. So we built a program that actually is the only one of its kind in California. And actually, we are having trouble finding one similar to it across the country, where our program can actually start when a person's in custody and they can earn their way out of jail and get to the out-of-custody portion of the program. And this program was designed to work with the offender on whatever they needed to work on. If their criminogenic needs, and I know you hear these words and you go, what the heck is a criminogenic need? And what it means is the thing that got them to keep committing crimes is who they hang out with, then we're going to deal with their companions. If the issue is they have criminal thinking and they don't care about victims and they think they're more important, then we're going to deal with their criminal thinking. If their issue is substance abuse, then that's what we care about. If it's they've never had a job, they don't know how to get a job, or frankly, we have a lot of folks that know very well how to get a job. They don't have a clue how to keep it, because about 2 days into it, they decide they don't really need to show up, or they're going to tell their boss what they really think of them, and they have the job for about 3 days, and then they're back saying, well, I don't have a job, and I don't know what happened. So if they need to learn how to keep a job, then we're going to give them that. If they need to figure out how to have a better relationship with their family and their kids, and maybe even get reunited with their kids, then we're going to give them that as well. So whatever they need, this program is designed individually by the person to get that service. It's a one-stop shop. They go there and everything they need is there. They're going to be in certain cognitive behavioral groups, because with this group, we often tell them what to do as if they know what that means. Like we say, quit getting to fights. Well, this group, many of them have done nothing but get in fights since they were 5, and no one told them what to do otherwise. They think if you get angry, you get in a fight. And so if we say don't fight, they go, okay, and then the next time they get mad, they get in a fight. So now we're going to teach them something else to do when they get mad, and other things that they can do, and explain to them that it's normal that people get angry. We all have these issues, blah, blah, blah. But we're actually giving them skills that no one else ever gave them. I mean, it's not rocket science, but it really is what seems to work with offenders. And so we opened our day reporting center, which of course, because we're Napa and we think we're special, because we have wine, we always have to have special names for everything. So we have a community corrections service center. And it's a day reporting center, but we had a special name. And initially, City Council in Napa, because it's right in downtown Napa, said, we don't want this program in Napa, thank you very much. We don't want to invite criminals to come to Napa. Then we reminded them that 80% or so of our criminals live in the city of Napa. The jail is where most criminals are locked up, and that's in the same building that our reporting center's in, and probation's on the 2nd floor. So on the 3rd floor you have the jail, 2nd floor you have probation. On the 1st floor you now have this center where everybody gets to work together. People can start in jail, earn their way out. People can be on probation, be struggling, and be in this program, as opposed to going back into jail if they can maintain in the program. So we've been open since March of 2009. Not an incredibly long time. You also have to remember we are very small compared to you. We may be your next door neighbor, but we're much smaller. And so our numbers are small. We have graduated 50 people-ish, 50-ish, since we have been open, because this is not an easy program to get through. It takes 6 months is the magic that you could do. Most people are taking 9 months to a year to get through it because it's hard work. The DA who started out saying, we're not doing this, I don't want any part of this, this is not a good plan, is now the biggest supporter of the program, because they're actually seeing not only the changes in the behavior of the clients, but they're also seeing the work that they have to do to get out of this program. And what we have now after these graduates, we are tracking all of our graduates. We have a 68% employment rate at the time they graduate from the program, meaning most of them came in unemployed and 68% of them are walking out the door with a job. 100% of them, 100%, have walked out with a place to live. Many of them come in homeless. You know, offenders don't keep homes very well. They walk out with a place to live. The recidivism rate is 23.6%. We beat you, Darby. And generally, when we look at recidivism, we are counting a new conviction of a new crime. And because we promised our Board of Supervisors when we started this program, if it's not working, we're going to shut it down, we are counting everything. So even a violation of probation would go into this, which for normally you wouldn't count in recidivism. We're not just looking at new offenses. There has been not one single violent crime that has occurred with any of these 23.6% of the reoffenses. Majority of them actually are what we would consider victimless crimes, because they're things like drunk in public. That usually doesn't impact too many people. There's been a few possession of drug charges that made them Prop 36 eligible yet one more time. Not that I have an opinion about Prop. See, you have your opinions about realignment. I have my opinions about Prop 36. But so that number really does take into account anything that they do. A technical violation would still count in that percentage. And the folks that started in jail and were able to earn their way out of jail early, the court order is actually worded that probation has the discretion to put the person in the program, and if they're doing well, to take them out of jail early and continue them in the out-of-custody portion of the program, giving probation that full authority over who's in there, because they have to be the right risk level. And this is a program for high-risk offenders, not very high risk, but for high-risk offenders. It's not for sex offenders. It's not for violent offenders. But it is for a huge majority of the population we serve, including some of our post-release community supervision folks have been referred into this program and are attending it. So it isn't excluding them just because they had previously been in prison.
5 minutes.
Okay. They're working closely with our county substance abuse and mental health programs for folks that need additional services beyond what the center can give them. But we really have seen a shift in behavior, because when you have less people reoffending, you have that community safety, which is our primary goal. When we opened this, our goals were to reduce recidivism, making our community a safer place, and rehabilitating offenders. And there have been a few dropouts. Yes, of course, that will happen, but we're right there to pick them up. And some have had to go in and out 2 or 3 times to actually make it stick. And I think when you hear from the substance abuse people, you will hear that's not necessarily unusual. Sometimes people have to fail a couple times. But we have definitely seen in these 3 years amazing progress, and have really shifted the supporters in the community. Law enforcement loves this program because their fear was these people downtown were going to cause them problems. Never happened. Hasn't. In fact, these people are less trouble. The district attorneys love it because they're seeing the change. I will say the public defenders don't love it as much, because what they hear from the offender is, you know, it used to be a lot easier when we didn't have to do anything. You know, now probation actually makes us do stuff, and it's more work. So if they're representing their client's point of view, we're making them work harder, and they don't love that. But we're also seeing the positive side of that. We are reuniting families. We have a whole parenting component to it. Children have been returned to parent custody based on them being through this program. We work with child welfare services. So we have really seen a significant improvement, and we are looking at expanding as our numbers continue to come in. Our numbers are coming in much slower than yours, and we do have less, although we do have a number of 1170H split sentence cases in our county. Our judges actually view it a little differently and see that supervision piece as the time for rehabilitation. So we are using our programs for that as well.
Thank you very much. Chris, I think you're kicking us off for the
Yes.
second half. Right.
Good evening. The first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to thank District Attorney Don Dubain for orchestrating our invitation to be here with you, and Solano County and the surrounding cities for welcoming us into your community, and talking about this thing that's literally fallen in our lap. The first thing I want to talk about is Although realignment is very real and it's happening very quickly, people have been getting out of prison and in our communities since prison has been around. It's been happening the whole time. I think that the most important thing is that we have a firmer understanding of what happens when a person reoffends. So what I bring to the table is I am actually a felon, or at least at one point I was. My bio is actually in the folder there. I don't know how many of you had a chance to read it. But in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is overview that real quick. I just look like this. I used to be quite the nasty creature. I grew up in a tough neighborhood, Hunters Point. If any of you are familiar with San Francisco, it's a community that is absolutely not a stranger to violence, crime, and all kinds of interesting things. And through different stays and different facilities, all kinds of different offenses, and finally landed myself in the Choices program at the age of 30. I had already had a child, I'd already screwed up a marriage, and all kinds of neat little things. One of the things that constantly caused me to believe that it was completely impossible to ever catch up, because I did have friends who were successful. I had acquaintances that outgrew being an idiot, got it together, went to school, got an education, and raised a family. So I absolutely had individuals that contrasted my way of life. What my major factor was that I never believed once that there was a chance or an opportunity that was going to befall on me that I could absolutely take advantage of. Now, I know that sounds a bit like a victim, but at the time, I believed that. And belief is 98% of action. And so therefore, I would get out of jail, and not one person that I ever was a cellie with or in any facility with ever looked for a release date as an opportunity to come back. No one gets out of prison, or at least not many of us get out of prison and say, yeah, I can't wait to come back to this place. How about just don't let me go? Everybody, really, for the most part, most of us come out with the opportunity of believing that it's got to be something out there greater than what I'm doing. And the thing is, when you're in a place like CDC or even at the county level, I mean, you believe you can be an astronaut, because the truth is you do not have the reality in front of you of the hard work that it takes to actually become those things. And so when you do hit the ground and you realize that first hit of, on paper, you're a jerk, and you have to deal with that for the first time you go to apply for a job, or the first time that you get pulled over for a routine traffic ticket, you're dealing with it. And rightly so, because the truth is you did all those things. And what happens is there's nowhere to turn to say, how do I deal with that? How do I not blame that person? How do I not make it the officer's fault for arresting me because of my past? How do I not make it the judge's fault for convicting me to prison because of a lot of things I'd done when this thing wasn't all that bad? How do I deal with those things? The Choices program is a modeled program after Delancey Street. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Delancey Street Foundation. It's been around since the 70s. It was started by John Maher and then co-founded by Dr. Mimi Silbert. It is to say it best, it is definitely the cream of the crop in my mind of dealing with behavioral modification because of the impact. Now, Delancey Street doesn't look at things and say, okay, look, you've been in jail once, you've got a 30-day stay in jail, and you're going to get out. I don't think Delancey Street's for you. I don't think so. Delancey Street says, well, what we want to do is we want to get you when you're really at the end of the rope. And quite frankly, they've been quite successful at developing a community therapeutic model basically developing life within the community of Delancey Street and showing people, look, what we're going to do is we're going to structure this thing. We're going to show you how to have responsibility. We're going to show you how to develop a peer-to-peer responsibility and accountability. I believe Sheriff Stanton had actually said it earlier when he said one of the biggest issues in the jail today is the peer influence. You have current offenders or current inmates right now influencing other inmates to do certain things, to act certain ways. Don't do this, don't do that, or if you do that, you'll have these repercussions. And in the county level, they're absolutely using those threats all the way to the CDC level. You know, if you do this, you're going to be dealing with it in a county or in a state yard somewhere. What the Choices program has done, and I believe it started in 1994. I wasn't around yet. But Sheriff Don Horsley at the time got together, and he was a wonderful proponent of Delancey Street, and said, told Dr. Terry Lynch Delane and Shirley Lamar to come down to the McGuire facility located in Redwood City County and start some fashion of the Delancey Street model within the jail facility. Well, actually, most people thought that was crazy because one of the components of the Delancey Street model is something we call the game or something we call the group. And what it is an interpersonal, and we talked earlier about cognitive behavioral therapeutic groups. These are peer-to-peer interpersonal groups. These are basically where men or women will absolutely sit in a group and they'll air their differences out but never get out of their seat. And I'm talking heated discussions because we're talking about people who are used to just going to a corner somewhere, handling it, and the last guy standing wins. And this is actually makes a lot of sense given the environment that you're from. I mean, actually, it's kind of an accolade. And so what we do is we say, look, we want you to air those same differences. We don't want to call those differences wrong. We don't want you to feel like you're broken for having those differences. What we want to do is we want to say, learn to air them out. Learn to discuss them in the fashion of a healthy individual. And that is, express your feelings. Try not to take so many things personal. In the scope of your life, did that guy looking at you funny really mean all that? And what happens is, in the interim of that happening, a lot of the times you will then begin to develop, when it comes out of your own mouth, wow, that wasn't really that big of a deal, and I feel a little bit like an idiot right now. I mean, I can't believe I took that personal. And our average resident, I'll call them, of the Choices program isn't, we have everybody from gangbangers, and doesn't mean that they're dropouts. Not all our guys are dropouts. We have high-profile cases. We have offenders of all kinds of different walks, and they all live with each other. We do not have two white guys living with each other in a cell. We have a white guy and a black guy. And they're red banders, basically meaning that they're state people. And basically, in the 19 years of our existence, we have never had a physical altercation. Never. Not one. And the reason that we do that is because, first of all, every single person that is on our staff has been in their shoes. Every person. In fact, that's really what we bring to the table. Any letters behind our name are not going to make a guy understand I can help you. That's not going to happen. Of course, it helps to make sure that I'm going to direct you in the right way, that I'm giving you the right information. Education's king. And I'm a huge proponent of education. And in fact, I push it on everybody. But one of the things that I bring to the table in the Choices program is I'm the only member of the staff that is a product of the Choices program. The only member. My name is on the GED board at 30 years old in that program. And that to me is a huge accolade because, as it says in my bio, when I left Delancey Street, I went back to school. I got an education. I learned what the hell I was doing wrong. I stayed in Delancey Street for a few years because I wanted to make sure I had it right. And when I left Delancey Street, I said, okay, look, I need to get into the world. I got some things to do, and I got a lot of catching up to do. But I also needed to go back to a community I've been taking from my whole life. And I have to look them dead in their face and say, I know you don't have to, but man, am I really hoping you give me a chance. And I won't make you an idiot. And that's the same thing I told Judge Forkham when he sent me to Delancey Street instead of sending me to prison for 25 years. And he did it with a 12-year joint suspension. And he looked at me and said, kid, don't make me an idiot. Well, I didn't. In fact, I walked back into his courtroom and I showed him the keys to the jail. And I said, sir, thank you very much, because you gave my mother a son. And you gave my son a father. And ever since then, him and I have actually had this wonderful relationship. And without taking too much more time, I want to touch on a couple other things that I feel are a large contributor to what we do in the community. Our GED program is paramount. Most of our guys that come in have zero to little education. Some cannot even read and write. And they're embarrassed. They're completely embarrassed that they don't know how to do that. And it's something, a trigger is something as easy as being asked to do a current event. And these guys will literally freak out. Now, if you didn't have any interaction with this guy or no involvement in his life, you would just think he's being the jerk he's been his whole entire life, and that's why he's in jail. But the truth is, he's completely embarrassed and doesn't know how to ask for help, and it probably stems all the way back to him being a kid, because let's face it, kids are mean. So instead of asking for help, he reacts. What we do is we pull him to the side and say, you know what, man, it's okay. It's all right you don't know how to read, and let's learn the word cat. Let's start there. And before you know it, that guy is excited to do a current event. I mean, you will marvel at a man who feels so accomplished just because he learned how to read. And he stands up before his peers and says, bear with me, I'm just learned how to do this. And then he goes and reads a piece of news that's in our community today. And he reads it with some conviction and then gives his opinion. That's powerful. This is what we try to put back into our communities. But what's also important and a huge component of our program is the continuum of care. Look, we can have them in the jail all day long. We could tell them to act right. We could tell them, do what we're asking you to do. Go through the rules that we've asked you to follow. And when you don't, be honest. Tell us. We're going to yell at you for a minute. Probably, we have a thing called a contract. This thing's great. Choices program is the only place in the jail where you will go in and you will see inmates scrubbing a clean wall. I'm not kidding. They're literally on the wall and they're scrubbing it. And I've had plenty of tours come in and say, are they on meds? No. They are purging some of the things they've done wrong in front of their peers, which is a huge image breaker. Ginormous image breaker. Ginormous is my own word, by the way.
Chris, we're going to have to move just for this time for
Sure.
questions, I think. We'll get the other folks.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
No problem. I could probably go on and on all night about this, and I hope to be able to talk to you at some point before we leave. If we could take a couple minutes, I'd love to talk about this thing. I'm going to turn it over to Damon Kasparian and let him tell you about his journey.
We'll switch chairs. Hi, my name's Damon Kasparian. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, I'm here tonight. I'm an individual that took advantage of the opportunity that San Mateo County has committed themselves to in allowing the Choices program to be available to individuals that come through their county jail. I came to the Choices program in 2007. Just real briefly, I'm an individual that I've done 5 state prison terms. I've done 12 violations. I've abused drugs for 20 years. And I've been in half the prisons in this state. And all the insanity and violence and heartache that goes along with all that. So I came to Choices, and Choices introduced to me, Choices forced me through I came to Choices and I found motivation. I came to a county that wasn't willing to negotiate with me based on my past. I came to a county that was not going to give me the deal or any version of the deal and offered me more time than I wanted to do. Because of that, I elected to go up to the Choices program. I thought I could manipulate those people to go to bat for me and maybe get me an opportunity at a lower sentence or some type of deferred or program or something. I went up there, and Chris Odell and Miss Shirley Lamar kicked my butt for 24 months. And I scrubbed every piece of wall space in that whole program. I scrubbed floors. I scrubbed everything everything we have up there. But I was motivated. The key thing that I want to present to you is that I was motivated, and that initial motivation was to avoid consequences. In the 22 months that I spent in Choices, what was an initial motivation to avoid consequences became a motivation based on some legitimate self-esteem that I had developed through a lot of the processes that Chris just described. In that 22 months, I had made a commitment to continue my training and my commitment to my personal development. And I ended up going, thankfully I ended up getting sentenced by a judge who believed in rehabilitation and recovery. They gave me a lengthy suspended sentence. They allowed me to go to a long-term residential treatment program, which I did. I'm now the community director of that program, and I supervise 115 men there now. So everything I do in my life, I learned at Choices, every single thing. And the same as Chris, am focused completely and solely on giving back to my community and the men that come to Jericho and to Choices. So that's what I do, that's what I promote, and that's what we encourage. The biggest thing when I'm sitting and listening to, I've been to this realignment discussions in San Joaquin County, I've been to it in San Mateo County, Santa Clara County, now Solano County. And this is a really exciting time, and it's a unique opportunity to create an atmosphere for individuals and an environment and an opportunity that if it's based with the right motivation, if we have the right motivation, and the motivation can either be the carrot or the stick. Motivation can either be, hey, you're going to slam me with so much time that I'm not willing to do it, I don't want to play anymore. Or it can be a carrot. I know that in Santa Clara County, they're terminating probation for individuals that are willing to go and follow whatever procedure that probation and the courts have stipulated for them. Jericho Project, the program that I work at now, is one of the options in that sentencing. So I think that if you create motivation, right, and a legitimate opportunity to train people and to supervise people, educate people, I think this can be a big success. So it's been that in my life, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the efforts of everybody that makes something like this possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Melanie Ruperto, and I was also a resident at the Choices program in San Mateo County. And how I got there is over the last 15 years, over the whole course of my life, I've been involved with substance abuse problems in my family and also violent crimes or gangbanging. And in 2010, I was convicted of the same crime 3 times. And when I got to jail, the 3rd time, finally they gave me some time. And when I got there, I was sitting in the pod with all the people, and it was so easy for me to kick my feet up and get comfortable and make it okay for me to keep going back to jail. And from the other pod, I had heard about this program called Choices, and so instead of making it easier for myself to keep coming back to jail, I decided to maybe do the right thing and enter into a program. So when I got to Choices, I learned how to be accountable. They gave me jobs to do, different jobs, and one of them I was the contract coverage, so when somebody got in trouble, they had to come to me and I had to delegate tasks and walls for them to scrub and, you know, clean the bathroom with the toothbrush, and I was responsible for those people. And I had to be accountable for something. I had to get up every morning before they did and make sure that they were awake and checked in. And as I began to do this, I started to see changes in myself. After being in the program for 2 months, they told me that I could leave and go to get modified to a program, and I was scared. I was really scared. I had kept reading in the papers about all my friends that were getting shot, getting life sentences, and I didn't want that for myself. So I begged them. I cried and begged for them not to modify me to a program, because what I got out of Choices was different from any program that I've gotten anywhere else. At the other treatment centers that I went to, they taught me how to work on myself and then be accountable for it later on. In Choices, I learned how to be accountable for my actions while I was learning about myself, which made it different from everywhere else that I had been to. A lot of programs that I went to taught me that they can change me or help me change from the inside out. And in Choices, I got how to build myself from the outside and work my way in. Today, I live a life with integrity. I'm on the Reentry Advisory Committee for San Mateo County. I'm on the Board of Commission for Substance Abuse and Mental Health, also in San Mateo County. And today, the program I work are all things that I learned in Choices. Part of the things that I do today are still the things that I learned while I was there. That includes schooling. While I was there, I got some education and college credits. And who would have thought that I would be in county jail earning college credits? And now I have gotten accepted into San Francisco State University through Project Rebound. I also work with the counselors there till this day and able to give back to my community. I'm also a peer mentor for the County of San Mateo, and that's what I do today. I'm accountable for my actions. I can show up to these events and know that I have something to give back to my community, and that makes me proud of who I am. Thank you.
Thank you, panel two. That was great. Mary, we can learn a lot from you, and we're going to take advantage of the close proximity. Young lady, gentlemen, thank you for making the right choice.
Thank you.
It's good to have you as a part of the solution instead of being the problem. All right, do I have any questions to pick up from anybody? Any questions you want to turn? I have one so far. Any others? And we'll take questions from the audience if you want. Well, let's start with our first question. It's for CDCR staff. And Tanya, I'm not sure that you work in a division that can answer this, but we're going to let you try it anyway. The question is, with a 17,000 plus reduction in population, what is the amount of reduction in corrections officers and other staff?
So our reductions aren't necessarily tied for the 17,000 because that was the first month and like first quarter. And like the county, we're kind of funded or defunded, if you will, based on the annual rate. So this year, for the first 18 months of the realignment, we're scheduled to lose about 4,000 positions. So that's not necessarily all staff because we had some vacancies or some adjustments that we would absorb. I think you read in the paper that we sent out over 500 layoff notices for our first wave, which are staff who are scheduled to be laid off February 29th, and we have quarterly layoffs after that for a couple of years. We have a $1.1 billion cut for next fiscal year, so that equates to staff, programs, and many other things. So hope that answers the question.
Thank you. I hope you lay off my daughter's ex-husband. Oh, did I say that? Did I say that out loud? Any questions for any of our panelists, any of our participants? Over here, Don Dubain.
I have a question.
Here you go, Don.
Maybe for Donna.
For Donna?
Maybe it's for Donna, or maybe it's for the CDC folks, but
the statistic came up that 71% of the PRCSers are either high risk or what was it, high risk or very high risk, right? Yes. And what does it take in layman's terms to be deemed high risk and very high risk offenders?
It's based on our risk assessment.
I don't think I can run that fast.
Donna, is your question more
Oh, you're over
related to the data I presented, or?
Here you go.
No, it's because you do the evaluation, you've got those statistics, that you've got very high risk offenders and high risk offenders, and there are 71% currently of your PRCSers. In layman's terms, what does it mean to be a high risk offender?
Basically, our risk assessment tool is what determines the risk level, and it's the risk to reoffend or commit another crime. So, and based on the data we've received, 15% of our cases have scored at a very high risk. So they present a very high likelihood to reoffend.
All right, but so does that mean...
Doesn't mean that they will reoffend. It's just
so does that mean you could be a low, like the lady from CDC was saying, you could be a low-level, so-called repeat offender of low-level offenses?
correct, because risk level is not necessarily tied to the type of crime you commit. So where CDCR was speaking of low-level crimes, that's based on the type of crime. That's different than the risk an offender poses to commit another crime. So it's two different things. Our risk assessment is not necessarily based on the crime in and of itself. It's the risk for a client to reoffend. The low-level offenders that CDCR was speaking of is the type of crimes that they're classifying as low-level offenses, not necessarily low-risk offenders. So it's two different groups. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, Supervisor Seifert.
I actually just wanted to make a comment. First of all, I enjoyed all the presentations, but I was absolutely taken with Mary's presentation about the value and the benefits that can be derived from a reporting center that has the right intentions. And, you know, and as we look through to our own practices here, and looking forward through the Community Corrections Partnership, I do hope, and I hope that through the Board of Supervisors, we're going to be seeing the kind of things that are going to be able to help people to be successful. And whether it's that exact model, which I hope I can go visit, and because I'm absolutely taken with the idea and how we can really transfer that to our own circumstances and our own situation. But I just think that if we leave here today without really talking about the value not only of Mary's presentation, but all of them, and how we can really implement that here and make our own programs better, we're doing really a disservice to the 3 or 4 hours that we've all spent here. So thank you to all the speakers, and I'm looking forward to learning more about your what you had to offer.
And just on that note, we are just next door. So I did bring cards if anybody is interested in coming to see the program or needs more information. We love giving tours, and we're happy to have people come visit, and we're just down the road. So.
Yeah, fortunately, we have some very good models out there, and Mary's is one of them, and we are going to take advantage of that. And we are moving in that direction. It's just going to take us a little while to get there. Judge, a question.
I don't really have a question. I just found that last panel, I found everybody very inspirational. It just is, you know, it's a good thing for a judge, and I wish more of my colleagues had been here, to see that people who have been to prison can work through their lives and succeed, rehabilitate, and return something to their communities. I mean, that is exceptional. So that's my comment.
Well, Chris is a good example. You turned a rap sheet into a biography, so well done. Any other questions we can answer for you? Anybody else? Mayor Batchelor? Here you go, sir.
You never let an elected official get out without saying something. So But I do want to, on behalf of the 4Cs, I do want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Thank you, Laura, for the fine venue. The food was good. A lot of us ate more than probably what we should. But more importantly, the program, I thought, was very, very well done. We had the local group coming in and talk. Thank you to CDCR, my old employer, and I appreciate that. You guys have a difficult job at hand, and I know that we all want to support you, and you want to support us. So, having said that, thank you very, very much, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Obviously, you may want to talk to some of the people that were on the last panel, so I would encourage you to do so. And on behalf of all of us, thank you and congratulations on turning your life around and becoming good stewards of society, and we thank you very much for that. Thank you very much.